Let's start with France, okay? When we think about, I think David's quite right, that we need to think about the diversity in Europe when you're looking at the far right, because it's quite easy to look at the story of the European far right and think it's on the rise everywhere and equally throughout Europe, and it's really not. If you look first at France, the country we've tossed most about thus far, there's going to be elections. There were elections last month. Municipal elections, at which Marine Le Pen did extremely well. Her party, the French National Front, it was probably described as shocking or as an earthquake in the press, as it usually is. And this party is going to do very well again in May. The question, though, is how well are they doing compared to their historical average? We tend to forget the French National Front has been around now for 20-odd years. And it seems to get somewhere between 15 and 20% of the electorate. It's proven able to mobilize 15 to 20% of French voters. So in some ways, the story of France is a story of the stability of the far right. There's nothing particularly new about its rise over the last 2 or 3 years. It's debatable whether the French National Front is more powerful now than it was in the 1990s, 20 years ago. I mean, Cass has been studying this stuff a little bit longer than I have, but I think one can make the case that the 1990s were a real high point for the French National Front. And even if you think that the French National Front is going to be, or Marine Le Pen is going to be the next president of France, I can assure you that she's not going to be. There is a way in which France has responded to this populist challenge by finding ways through electoral institutions and behavior of coordination among mainstream parties to kind of leave the French National Front out of politics. A lot has been said about the UK, so I don't really want to take too much time here. But what is the story of the far right in the UK? It's very much one of a very marginal presence, but one that gets a fair amount of attention every now and then. The British National Party, the BNP, which is the same name as the French National Front, but is much less successful, used to be the most recognized far-right party in Britain, but now it really has become UKIP. And it could matter quite a bit, and Cass has already fleshed out this point, that one of the ways to look at the impact of the far right is not on what the far right does itself, but the way in which it will influence mainstream parties and will influence the type of policies, the type of political discourse that major parties of the left and right participate in. So the UK, I would put forward as a case in which the far right is quite weak electorally, but certainly has perhaps an outsized impact. Now turning to Germany. I mean, Germany is the country in Europe where the far right has the least reasonable chance to be politically successful. That's kind of a dramatic statement, right? If you think about Germany as the country in which the far right is expected to be the least successful, well, you know, turn back the clock a while, and that statement seems quite out of place. There has been a dramatic reorientation in German politics post-1945, which I could talk about longer. But one of the reasons that it really matters for us today is that the far right has been marginalized in German politics to a very, very large degree. Yes, one can certainly see episodes at the local level of neo-Nazi parties doing well. One can see a lot of horrible episodes of hate crimes and social mobilization, but as a political force in Germany, the radical right, I cannot see it really gaining any sort of power in the foreseeable future. And even if it were to enter the Bundestag by some miracle, every other political party in Germany would credibly not cooperate with it. Now, Germany really matters, right? Germany really matters for the future of Europe. And in some ways, I think Europe has been spared by the fact that in a core country, the country that was in the end responsible for trying to put the European Union back together, there was not a far-right party that could have been an incredible irritant or an incredible point of pressure on the German mainstream parties. The fact that there wasn't this large populist force in the key country in Europe during the meltdown was particularly important.